The lights are on right now. Your phone is charging. Your refrigerator is humming. Water flows when you turn the tap. You can buy food whenever you want. But what happens when all of that stops? Not in some distant future, not in a Hollywood movie, but in the next few months or even weeks. The electrical grid that powers modern civilization is far more fragile than most people realize. And when it fails, millions will panic within hours. The question isn't whether you'll face this crisis, it's whether you'll be ready when it arrives. Most people won't be. They'll scramble for resources that are already gone, fight over supplies that ran out days ago, and realize too late that their comfortable lives depended entirely on a system that was always one failure away from collapse. You don't have to be one of them. Right now, before the chaos begins, you have a choice. You can ignore the warnings like everyone else, or you can take action and ensure that when the grid goes down, you and your family will be among the few who survive with dignity and safety. If you're serious about protecting what matters most, subscribe now, because what you're about to learn could save your life when millions of others are left in the dark. The modern electrical grid is a marvel of engineering, but it's also a house of cards. In the United States alone, the grid consists of over 450,000 miles of high-voltage transmission lines, and much of this infrastructure is over 50 years old. Transformers that regulate power across entire regions can take 18 months to replace if they fail, and there are only a handful of manufacturers worldwide producing them. When a major transformer goes down, especially one of the extra high voltage models, the entire region can be without power for months or even longer. This isn't speculation. In 2003, a software bug in Ohio caused a cascading blackout that left 50 million people across the northeastern United States and Canada without power for up to 2 weeks. That was a temporary failure with a known cause and a clear path to recovery. Now imagine a scenario where the cause isn't a software glitch but a coordinated attack, a massive solar flare, or widespread infrastructure decay happening simultaneously across multiple regions. The recovery wouldn't take weeks. It would take years. Solar storms are not science fiction. They're regular occurrences that most people never hear about because they miss Earth or strike with low intensity. But in 1859, a solar storm known as the Carrington event released so much electromagnetic energy that telegraph systems across Europe and North America sparked, caught fire, and shocked operators. If a storm of that magnitude hit today, it would fry transformers, destroy electronics, and cripple the grid for a decade or more. In 2012, Earth narrowly avoided another Carrington-level event when a massive coronal mass ejection passed through our orbit just days after our planet had already moved through that section of space. Scientists estimate we were less than a week away from a catastrophe that would have cost trillions of dollars and plunged the world into chaos. The next one might not miss. NASA and NOAA monitor solar activity constantly, but even with early warning, there's very little that can be done to protect the entire grid in time. Some critical infrastructure can be temporarily shut down to avoid damage, but the vast majority of transformers and power lines would be exposed and vulnerable. Cyber attacks are another very real threat that keeps grid operators awake at night. In 2015, hackers successfully infiltrated Ukraine's power grid and shut down electricity to 230,000 people for several hours. That attack was a demonstration, a proof of concept showing that critical infrastructure can be remotely accessed and disabled by skilled attackers. Since then, cybersecurity experts have warned repeatedly that the US grid is vulnerable to similar attacks, and in many cases, our infrastructure is even less protected than Ukraine's was. Utility companies have been slow to upgrade security because the costs are enormous and the threat feels distant until it's too late. But the threat isn't distant. Nation-states, including China, Russia, and North Korea, have all been caught probing US energy infrastructure, mapping systems, and planting malware that could be activated during a conflict or crisis. When the attack finally happens, it won't come with a warning. One moment the power will be on, and the next moment entire regions will go dark with no clear timeline for restoration. Physical attacks on the grid are even simpler and harder to prevent. In 2013, gunmen opened fire on a California substation, destroying 17 transformers in just 19 minutes before disappearing without a trace. The attack caused minimal disruption only because backup systems kicked in. But experts testified before Congress that if just 9 critical substations were hit simultaneously, the entire US grid could be down for 18 months. 9 targets. That's all it would take. There are thousands of substations across the country, many of them in remote areas with no security other than a chain-link fence. A determined group with basic knowledge could cripple the grid in a single coordinated strike, and law enforcement would be overwhelmed before they even understood what was happening. This vulnerability has been public knowledge for over a decade, yet very little has been done to secure these sites because upgrading security at thousands of locations is expensive and politically unsexy. Politicians would rather fund projects that voters can see and feel, not invisible infrastructure improvements that prevent disasters most people don't believe will happen. When the grid fails, the consequences cascade faster than most people can imagine. Within hours, gas stations will run out of fuel because pumps require electricity. ATMs will stop working, and credit card systems will go offline, leaving people with only the cash they have on hand. Grocery stores will close within a day as refrigeration fails and perishable food spoils. Pharmacies won't be able to dispense medication. Hospitals will switch to backup generators, but those generators only have fuel for a few days at most. Water treatment plants will shut down, and within 72 hours, tap water will stop flowing or become unsafe to drink. Sewage systems will back up. Cell towers will die as their backup batteries drain. The internet will vanish. Communication will collapse to whatever you can manage face-to-face or with a battery-powered radio. Law enforcement will be overwhelmed within the first week as looting, violence, and desperation spread. Fire departments won't be able to respond effectively without fuel and functioning communication systems. This is not a movie scenario. This is what actually happens when the grid goes down for more than a few days, and every emergency management agency in the developed world has simulated this exact sequence of events. The average American household has less than 3 days of food at home, and most of that food requires refrigeration or cooking. When the power goes out, people will immediately rush to stores to stock up, but shelves will be empty within hours. The supply chain that keeps those stores filled operates on a just-in-time model, meaning there's very little inventory sitting in warehouses. Everything moves constantly from producers to distributors to retailers, and the entire system depends on electricity, fuel, and digital communication. When one link breaks, the whole chain collapses. In a prolonged blackout, there will be no restocking. Trucks won't be able to refuel. Distribution centers won't be able to process orders. Even if food exists somewhere, it won't reach the people who need it. Within 2 weeks, hunger will be widespread. Within a month, starvation will begin. Cities will become death traps as millions of people compete for dwindling resources with no way to leave because vehicles ran out of gas and public transportation stopped operating. But here's the critical truth that separates survivors from victims. The chaos is predictable and preparation is possible. Right now, while the system is still functioning, you can stockpile food, water, and supplies that will carry you through the first 3 months of a blackout. 3 months might sound like a long time, but it's the minimum time frame experts recommend for surviving a major grid failure. After 3 months, either the grid will be partially restored, or society will have adapted to a new reality where barter, local production, and community networks replace the systems that failed. Your goal isn't to survive forever in isolation. Your goal is to stay safe, fed, and healthy during the most dangerous period when desperation is at its peak and organized relief hasn't yet arrived. The people who prepare now will have options. The people who wait will have nothing but regrets. Water is your first priority, and it's non-negotiable. A human can survive 3 weeks without food, but only 3 days without water. You need 1 gallon per person per day for drinking and basic hygiene, which means a family of 4 needs 360 gallons to last 3 months. That sounds like a massive amount, but it's achievable with proper planning. Store water in food-grade containers, not old milk jugs that will leak or contaminate the water. Rotate your supply every 6 months to keep it fresh. Add a few drops of unscented bleach per gallon if you're storing tap water long-term. 8 drops per gallon is the standard ratio for disinfection. But stored water is only part of the solution. You also need a way to purify water from natural sources like rivers, lakes, or even rain. Boiling works but requires fuel. Water purification tablets are portable and effective against bacteria and viruses, but won't remove chemical contaminants. A high-quality gravity filter can process thousands of gallons and remove almost everything dangerous, making it one of the best investments for long-term survival. Don't assume you'll figure out water later. Without clean water, everything else is irrelevant because dehydration will kill you long before hunger does. Food storage requires more thought than most people give it. You can't just buy a bunch of canned goods and call it done. You need calories, variety, and shelf stability. The average adult needs around 2,000 calories per day to maintain body weight and energy, which means you need 180,000 calories per person for 3 months. That's roughly 600 cans of soup or 200 pounds of rice and beans combined. Rice and beans are the foundation of survival food storage because they're cheap, calorie-dense, and last for years when stored properly in airtight containers with oxygen absorbers. Add canned vegetables, canned meats like tuna and chicken, peanut butter, pasta, oats, and dried fruit to ensure nutritional balance. Don't forget cooking oil, salt, sugar, and spices, because bland food will destroy morale faster than you'd expect. Morale matters. When everything is falling apart, a hot meal with flavor can be the difference between holding it together and falling apart mentally. Store freeze-dried meals if you can afford them. They're lightweight, last 25 years, and only require boiling water. Stock up on multivitamins because even with a good food supply, you'll likely be missing key nutrients during a prolonged crisis. Heat and cooking are often overlooked until it's too late. If the grid is down in winter, hypothermia becomes a serious threat. You can't rely on electric heating, and if you're using natural gas, that supply could be cut off too. Wood stoves are ideal if you have the space and a supply of firewood, but most people don't. Portable propane heaters like the Mr. Heater Buddy are effective and safe for indoor use, but you'll need multiple 20-pound propane tanks to get through a winter. A single tank lasts about 50 hours on low heat, so plan accordingly. Never use outdoor grills or camp stoves inside without proper ventilation. Carbon monoxide poisoning kills quickly and silently. For cooking, a simple camp stove with propane or butane canisters will let you prepare hot meals even when the power is out. Stock up on fuel now because prices skyrocket during emergencies and supplies vanish instantly. Alternative cooking methods, like solar ovens, work in good weather but are useless on cloudy days or in winter. Have multiple backup options so you're never dependent on a single system. Medical supplies can't be improvised. When pharmacies close and hospitals are overwhelmed, you'll need to handle injuries and illnesses on your own. Build a comprehensive first aid kit that goes beyond Band-Aids and aspirin. Include antibiotics if you can obtain them. Fish antibiotics are chemically identical to human antibiotics and available without prescription, though you should research proper dosing carefully. Stock up on pain relievers, antihistamines, antidiarrheal, medication, and anything you or your family takes regularly. If someone in your household depends on prescription medication for chronic conditions like diabetes, asthma, or heart disease, work with your doctor now to get extra supplies. Some doctors will write prescriptions for emergency stockpiles if you explain the situation honestly. Insulin is particularly critical because it requires refrigeration, and without power, diabetics face life-threatening complications within days. Learn basic medical skills like wound cleaning, suturing, splinting fractures, and recognizing infections. There are countless free resources online, and the knowledge you gain now could save a life later when professional help isn't available. Don't wait until you're trying to stop bleeding or set a broken bone to figure out what to do. Security becomes a nightmare when society breaks down. Desperate people do desperate things, and when food runs out, your stockpile becomes a target. You need to be able to defend your home and family without relying on police who won't be coming. Firearms are the most effective deterrent, but they require training, safe storage, and a mindset most people aren't comfortable developing. If you choose to arm yourself, get proper instruction, practice regularly, and understand the legal and moral responsibilities that come with lethal force. Non-lethal options like pepper spray, tasers, and baseball bats are better than nothing, but they won't stop a determined group. The best security is being invisible. Don't advertise that you're prepared. Don't tell neighbors about your supplies. Keep curtains closed at night so people can't see you have lights or heat. If you're cooking, control the smell because hungry people will follow their noses. Barter carefully and never reveal how much you have. The moment people know you're stocked, you become a target. In a prolonged crisis, your survival depends as much on staying unnoticed as it does on having resources. Make your home look as abandoned and unremarkable as every other house on the street so threats pass by without a second glance. But preparation isn't just about stuff. It's about mindset. Most people will panic because they've never faced real hardship. They've never gone hungry, never lived without electricity, never had to make life or death decisions under pressure. When the grid fails, those people will freeze mentally. They'll wait for someone to fix it, for the government to show up, for things to go back to normal. And while they wait, they'll starve. You can't afford that paralysis. Right now, start training your mind to accept that disasters happen, systems fail, and sometimes you're on your own. Run practice drills with your family. Turn off the power for a weekend and live like the grid is down. Cook on your camp stove, use your stored water, see what breaks down and what works. The practice will expose holes in your plan and build confidence that you can actually survive when it's real. Mental toughness is a skill, and like any skill, it requires practice. The people who survive aren't the ones with the most gear. They're the ones who stay calm, adapt to changing conditions, and make smart decisions when everyone else is losing their minds. Start building that resilience now before you need it, because when the crisis hits, it'll be too late to develop the mindset that keeps you alive. Everything I've just told you is based on real vulnerabilities, documented failures, and expert projections. This isn't fear-mongering. It's risk assessment. The grid will fail. The only question is when, how bad, and whether you'll be ready. Most people reading this will do nothing. They'll nod along, think it's interesting, and go back to scrolling through their phones, trusting that someone else will handle it. But you're different. You're still here because something inside you knows that comfort is temporary, and preparation is the only rational response to a fragile system. So take the first step. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Like and comment below with one thing you're going to do this week to start preparing, because accountability matters. And if you want to be part of a community that takes survival seriously, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because the next video will cover exactly how to build your 3-month supply on a tight budget, which foods last longest, and the critical mistakes that will get you killed even if you think you're prepared. The grid is more fragile than you realize, and when it falls, millions will panic. Don't be one of them. Now let's talk about the single most dangerous mistake preppers make, and it's not what you think. It's not storing the wrong food or forgetting water filters. It's assuming they can do it alone. When the grid collapses, isolation equals death. The rugged individualist fantasy where you retreat to a bunker and survive solo is a myth that will get people killed. Humans survived for millennia because we formed communities, shared resources, and protected each other. That doesn't change during a crisis. In fact, it becomes even more critical. You need people you can trust, people who bring different skills, people who will watch your back when you're exhausted or injured. Start building that network now. Talk to neighbors who seem level-headed and self-reliant. Don't dump all your plans on them immediately, but feel out who shares your concerns and who might be an asset when things fall apart. Skills matter more than supplies in the long run. Someone who knows carpentry, medical care, mechanics, or gardening is worth their weight in gold when society resets. If you're lacking critical skills, learn them now. Take a wilderness first aid course. Learn how to garden and preserve food. Understand basic repairs and maintenance. The more you can do yourself, the more valuable you become to any group and the better your odds of thriving, not just surviving. Communication will be one of the first things to disappear, and most people don't realize how crippling that loss will be. When cell towers die and the internet vanishes, you'll be cut off from information, unable to coordinate with family members across town, and completely blind to what's happening beyond your immediate area. Ham radios are the solution that almost nobody considers until it's too late. A basic handheld ham radio costs less than $100 and can communicate over several miles. With a proper base station and antenna, you can reach hundreds of miles and tap into emergency networks that will still be operating when everything else is down. You do need a license to operate legally, but the test is straightforward and available online. More importantly, during an actual emergency, nobody is enforcing license requirements. The knowledge of how to use the equipment is what matters. Store your radios in a Faraday cage to protect them from electromagnetic pulses, whether from a solar storm or a high-altitude nuclear detonation. A Faraday cage is just a metal container that blocks electromagnetic radiation. A simple metal trash can with a tight-fitting lid works perfectly. Line it with cardboard so your electronics don't touch the metal directly, and you've got EMP protection for under $20. Let's address the psychological element that breaks people faster than hunger or cold: loss of purpose and routine. When the grid fails and normal life evaporates, people will spiral into depression, anxiety, and hopelessness. They'll give up even when they have the resources to continue. This is where mental preparation becomes as important as physical supplies. Establish routines immediately when the crisis begins. Wake up at the same time. Assign tasks. Keep busy. Idle time breeds despair. If you have children, maintaining structure is even more critical because kids need stability to process trauma. Keep them occupied with chores, education, and play. Protect their sense of normalcy as much as possible. Adults need to process the situation honestly but without catastrophizing. Yes, things are bad. Yes, the future is uncertain. But you're prepared, you're taking action, and you're going to make it through. That narrative matters. The stories you tell yourself determine whether you keep fighting or give up. Choose the story where you're capable, resourceful, and resilient, because that's the version of yourself you need to become. One final reality check: government help will not arrive when you expect it. FEMA openly states they can't respond to catastrophic events for at least 72 hours, and that's under ideal conditions. In a widespread grid failure affecting millions across multiple states, response times will stretch into weeks or months. Emergency services will prioritize critical infrastructure, hospitals, and government continuity. Individual neighborhoods won't see organized relief until much later. You cannot sit at home waiting for someone to rescue you. By the time help arrives, the people who weren't prepared will already be gone. This isn't cynicism. It's operational reality based on how disaster response works. Every major hurricane, earthquake, and flood proves the same lesson. The survivors are the ones who had supplies, plans, and the willingness to act independently. The victims are the ones who waited for help that came too late. Everything you've heard in this video represents decades of research, real-world failures, and hard lessons from people who've survived when systems collapsed. This isn't theory. It's documented reality backed by engineers, emergency managers, and military planners who study grid vulnerabilities for a living. The information is available to anyone willing to look, but most people won't, because it's uncomfortable to accept that the world they trust is built on a foundation that could crack at any moment. You've made it this far, which means you're already ahead of the curve. The question is what you do next. Will you take action? Or will you let this information fade into background noise like everything else you scroll past daily? If you're serious about protecting yourself and the people you love, you need to start today. Not tomorrow, not next month, today. Make a list. Calculate your water needs. Buy 1 week of extra food this month, then another week next month. Build incrementally if money is tight, but build consistently. Every day you wait is one less day of buffer when the collapse begins. And if you want to go deeper, you'll find in the description some detailed guides and documents that can take your preparedness to the next level. Check them out when you're ready because they cover scenarios, strategies, and specifics we couldn't fit into one video. The grid is fragile. The threats are real. Millions will panic when the system fails because they refuse to see the warnings until it was too late. You're not one of them anymore. You know what's coming. You understand what's at stake. Now prove it. Take action, prepare, survive, and make sure the people who matter most are standing beside you when the lights go out. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it before it's too late, because the time to prepare isn't after the crisis begins. It's right now, while you still can.